The Drey peoples on the surface are nothing especially notable. They're an interesting looking spider and crab-like creature that hails from Morrowind, but we see a lot of similar things in the Elder Scrolls series. They make their homes on both land and beneath the surface of many freshwater lakes, and are usually more docile and timid, but can become more enraged if provoked and can prove to be a worthy adversary. They are more intelligent than some wildlife, but in general they have no capacity for speech or communication with more advanced races. You see though, what actually makes the Drey so interesting isn't who they are now, but rather who they actually stemmed from in the past. Vivec, one of the three main great gods of Morrowind who we actually do meet in the games, was an astute historian and wrote many texts about the ancient world. And in some of these primeval documents, he talks about the long-lost and previous Drey culture. Apparently, thousands of years ago, the Drey were actually a much more advanced civilization, with many bustling and thriving cities, trade, writing, and most importantly, dominance. And not just dominance over the province of Morrowind, or even all of Tamriel for that matter, but rather, all of Nirn. By the way, for those of you that don't know what Nirn actually is, it's the name of the main planet that the series takes place on. It's part of a larger realm of existence called Mundus, which is encompassed not only by Nirn, but its two moons, Massor and Secundus, as well as the Divine Realm, shown here in black, which is home to other planets that house divine and sacred beings of great importance. Outside of that is the Red Zones, where Oblivion and the Daedric princes of more demonic presence live. And all of this is part of an entire realm of existence called Aetherius, which itself is a part of Arbis, the name of the entire galaxy that houses Aetherius and the Void. The games as we know them take place on Nirn, and more specifically, one of the four main continents called Tamriel. So the Drey ruled over not just Morrowind, and not just Tamriel, but literally, if Vivec's writings are to be believed, all of this. So the question for the Drey becomes, how did such an advanced and powerful civilization of highly intelligent and capable beings that ruled over all of Nirn become a docile and much less threatening creature thousands of years later? It's not unheard of in the Elder Scrolls series for massive civilizations to have great power across Nirn, but in no history books do we hear about anything nearly as powerful as the Drey are described here. Did they truly rule over the entire world? And if they did, how did they lose their power? How do so few people remember their absolute dominance? Shouldn't there be more stories, more ruins, and more remnants of a great civilization long past scattered throughout all of Tamriel and Nirn, like we see with the Dwemer? This mystery spawns more questions than it answers, and it makes us even wonder about the validity of Vivec himself, along with some other small references to ancient Drey in other books. Either way, though, this is one of the most fascinating and thought-provoking mysteries in Elder Scrolls, and shows just how deep and well-designed the lore really is. And well, we're just getting started. There are a lot of less well-known enemies and entities scattered all throughout the worlds of each Elder Scrolls game, some more terrifying than others. But one of the most rare and horrifying examples of this is the Reaper from Skyrim. It's an enemy that most players don't even know exists, and can only be accessed within the Soul Cairn inside of Castle Volkihar from the Dawnguard DLC. Deep within the Soul Realm is a tower blessed with great magic, and upon entering it you'll find the Reaper, the only instance of this enemy in any of the games. The Reaper is a giant shade with green glowing eyes that wields a massive battle axe. And upon fighting him, the Reaper will constantly summon adds and spit giant green acid at you. Once vanquished, the Reaper drops 3 black soul gems, and even more interestingly, a Daedric heart, suggesting that he is some sort of Daedra monster stemming from the lands of Hell, otherwise known as Oblivion in this universe. As to what exactly the Reaper is, it still remains unknown. Whether he is a tool of destruction from some powerful Daedric prince or a hellish primordial stew, something about this enemy is truly terrifying, especially considering it is the only time we see a Reaper in-game. Argonians are our favorite reptilian humanoid crossbreed in all of Tamriel, and they're actually one of the fan-favorite races you can play in most of the games. They usually come with special traits players can use, like breathing underwater, and can be a fun class to mix up the monotony of more rigid playstyles from human-like races. One question that has come to many players' minds, though, is if Argonians really are, in fact, reptiles, why do their females look like this? You see, reptilian creatures in real life don't actually breastfeed their young, and thus have not adapted to even grow larger chests, instead opting to just secrete fluids from their bodies. And yes, I'm not joking. But in the Elder Scrolls games, we can clearly see that for some reason, female Argonians seem to have disregarded this feature. We know from developer comments from even Pete Hines himself and some lore texts that Argonians are omnivivorous, meaning they lay eggs within their bodies and hatch and birth them. But we also know from direct lore documents from the Black Marsh, the land in Tamriel from which Argonians hail, that next to his trees specifically, Argonians actually lay their eggs. For those that don't know, the Hist trees are an ancient race of sentient trees that are native to the Black Marsh that allegedly created the Argonians in the image of man and Mer, a general term for elves in Tamriel. The Argonians were meant to serve the Hist in a symbiotic relationship, something we will talk about more later, but it still leads us to the question why the female Argonians even need breasts in the first place. The reason in lore the eggs are laid next to the Hist in the Black Marsh is they feed on the sap from the trees, with many Argonians arguing that those born away from Hist trees are less powerful beings. So maybe the reason female Argonians are built this way is to breastfeed their young Hist tree sap when they are not laid as an egg by a tree. But this wouldn't make sense because then why would female Argonians living by the trees also have developed breasts? On top of this, we know from some developer comments and lore texts again that Argonians do keep their eggs inside of them when away from Hist trees. On top of this, we know from some developer comments and lore texts again that Argonians that do keep their eggs inside them when they are away from Hist trees use histrophy to push Hist tree sap from within their body through glands to help feed their baby eggs inside them, a process similar to many reptiles in our real world. So if the Hist sap is being supplied before in the womb, and even Argonian females in Black Marsh are well endowed when the trees themselves are already providing nutrients, what gives? The best remaining theory is just that the female Argonians are simply made this way, as we know from the ancient Hist tree stories that Argonians were made in the image of man and Mer. So maybe their breasts were simply there to make them look more similar to that image. And some theories even postulate that the Hist created them that way to make it more easy for females to form relationships with other races, potentially to even spy on them in some sort of Hist grand plan. We may never truly know, but something fishy is going on. All of the modern-day Elder Scrolls games have begun in a very similar way, a prisoner finding his way out of his or her shackles and thrusting themselves into a brand new world. But it would seem the similarities stop there. In Morrowind, you play as a reincarnated general who turns out to be the revered and prophesied Nerevarine. In Oblivion, you play as the hero of Kavach that saves an entire realm from being consumed by Oblivion's chaos. And in Skyrim, you play as this idiot. On paper, these seem like obviously different characters and people. After all, how could the Neverine and Dragonborn be the same people? However, this is where it gets interesting. You see, countless years ago, the world of Nirn was created by a divine god called Lorkhan. This god deceived all his peers in the divine realm into pooling their resources to create Nirn, and this angered them very much. As punishment, he was killed by the other divines, led by Akatosh, that giant red dragon boy in Oblivion. His heart was thrust from his body and crashed into the area of Morrowind, creating the Red Mountain, and he was forever a banished and lost soul. Still, throughout all of history, many races have told stories of supposed Shezarines, which are believed to be mortal incarnations of the missing god, Lorkhan. So could it be that in every Elder Scrolls game, we are actually a Shezareen, a mortal amalgamation of Lorkhan himself, on a mission to defend the realm that he was responsible for creating in the first place? It would explain how we are always tasked with such important accomplishments and take the reins of important characters at such vital moments in history, leaving lasting impacts. It's also heavily implied from many texts in the game that this just might be the case.